It's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Carolyn Steele Gray. So, Carolyn, I remember meeting first at the North American Primary Care Research Group meeting many years ago, and I've just always been incredibly impressed by your body of work, and I really appreciate you coming today to present. Carolyn holds a Canada Research Chair in implementing digital health innovation. She's a scientist in the Science of Care Institute and in the Lunenfeld-Tanenbaum Research Institute at Sinai Health. And she's an associate professor at the Institute for Health Policy Management and Evaluation at the University of Toronto. So come on up.
So I've got the very enviable task being right before an excellent keynote and at the very end of a long day and a half. So we'll try and keep it a little light and a little fun because digital health can be a little grating. If you've gone through a major health information system transformation recently, you might have some very big feelings about technology. So I've been tasked to talk about data, tools, and AI to address the crisis. And it's interesting because I just added this slide in the last couple of days that all of those 10 crisis points that we talked about and many of the ways we can solve that, a lot of that can be solved by technology. A lot of that can be solved by integrated care, and I couldn't help but put that up because it's a lot of the work that I do. And even better if it's digitally enabled integrated care. This is a whole area of work, but let's talk a little bit more about primary care, and then maybe in future talks we chat about how the primary care system does a really nice job of underpinning a broadly integrated and digitally enabled system. But I also want to talk kind of how we think about technology. So some people in here do some sports. Some people are aware of triathlon. So this is a sport where you do a swim and then a bike and then a run. And when you do a full course Ironman distance, you're doing a 4K swim, a 100K bike ride, and then a marathon, a 42-kilometer run. So we often say in the triathlon community, you never really win on the swim, but you can definitely lose on the swim. Unless you're Lucy Charles Barkley earlier in Kona this year, who most certainly won on her swim. But this is a very rare occasion. So similarly, digital health in primary care and in most places of the healthcare system, we're not going to win on digital health, but we can definitely lose if we don't get it right. And we've been kind of losing. As we've seen many studies around the influence of technology, particularly EMRs, on things like physician burnout, attrition patterns, and other things. And it's interesting because we just keep seeing this happening. And I don't know, what is that thing they say when you keep trying the same thing and expecting a different result over and over again? And this seems to be the case in electronic medical record use in healthcare, not just primary care, but more broadly. But there's hope. And when I put in "there's hope, dog" into a PowerPoint AI platform, this is the image it gave me, which I thought was pretty fun. So we're going to talk about our three kind of components today. We're going to talk about AI in primary care, a little bit on data, which we've talked a lot about in the last day and a half, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on technology to support team-based care. So AI is a cool space. A few people in here are doing lots of work there. Andrew and Tara in particular, not fully where I kind of hang out, but I get to play in this space a little bit. So I thought, let's ask ChatGPT what they think. So I asked GPT, tell me about AI tools that can be used in primary care settings. And it gave me a nice long list of things it can do. And, it did align to a lot of the things we've been talking about the last couple of days. It can do things like risk prediction and prevention through digital triage, similar work to what Tara and Andrew are doing right now, patient engagement and education, administrative efficiency. So when we're thinking about where we build in efficiencies, like our conversation this morning, it's there. Doing telehealth virtual assistant work, so chatbots and things like that, helping us with our patients, and then of course data analytics and evaluation. GPT, though, also unprompted, suggested there might be challenges when we think about AI in this space. It told me about data privacy, ethical considerations, and ongoing validation problems around AI tools. It did not talk about the garbage in, garbage out problem, which I would have loved to have seen, but it did give a little nod to implementation challenges around thinking about how we integrate these tools. And that's not just a challenge in AI, that's going to be a challenge in digital health and how we think about implementation broadly. So that was cool. I asked another question. I said, please expand on these challenges, and it gave me lots more. And, similar things. So it did expand on those 3 points. And the things that I liked that it came up with were digging deeply into ethical considerations. So what data is going in and what implicit bias is in there. This is a conversation many of us are having. It did elevate the problem of interoperability. Another really big space we can think about and talk about for a while, but for us in Canada, our fragmented information systems really limit what we can and can't do with AI, particularly in primary care. We're only getting a particular slice of information, and when we talk about complex patients and integrated settings, we're missing a lot of the components we would need to really drive some of the algorithms we'd like to see. And then training in acceptance, particularly around the notion of trust in AI, which is still very nebulous. I mean, we have a trust problem in just like our EMRs, let alone an algorithm that we rarely understand its components and what drives it. So these are ongoing conversations without clear answers just yet. So, great job, GPT. And at the end of it, it also suggested that, we need research and stakeholder engagement to deal with these challenges. So how nice that we're all here and doing what GPT is telling us to do. And I said, oh, awesome. Can you please reference your previous answers? And obviously it couldn't, but so that's cool, GPT, I got you. So AI has some opportunities and it has some challenges for us, but we don't want to discount it. It's going to happen fast, and we need to think carefully about those challenges, particularly from a regulatory standpoint and what that means for us in primary care. Very briefly on data, because we talked about it so much, I wasn't really going to go into this too much today, but it's come up a lot. And what I have in front of you is a learning health system action framework that was very recently released from the Ontario Sports Support Unit in partnership with Trillium Health Partners. And you can't read this, but that's cool. The link is down there at the bottom. And it really shows that data is foundational to a learning health system. So like the wonderful dashboards that Ivy and her teams are building together, that is learning health systems, right? That's bringing data in to go up to decision makers and make real-time choices about what we can and can't do. There are lots of, again, challenges with doing this. I think we talked a little bit about data quality, what data we even have available to us. And among the challenges too is that we actually have tons of data in lots of places, but whether it's meaningful to the people on the ground and to the decision makers who need to drive what we're doing and what we're not, and whether it's actionable are two really critical things we need to think about. The meaningfulness one, I might say a few times, because we tend to think the more information we have, and in any of its forms, it's going to be good. So let's throw it all together in a big interoperability mix and it's going to be amazing. But then what you end up with is cognitive fatigue, cognitive burnout, because you don't understand and you can't unpack what that information even is. So super opportunities here for learning health systems and using data. Really important we get meaningfulness and actionability correct. And I think with primary care, we have some thoughts about where we need to go and what levers we need to pull, which can help us think this through. And the last piece I really want to talk about and have us work through a little bit today is where technology can sit in team-based care. And I was excited yesterday because team-based care came up a lot. Again, I do lots in integrated care. So I had this slide well before yesterday, and I'm glad that this is a big topic. Because technology does a lot of things for us in a team environment. What you see in front of you is some work from a Canadian researcher, Dr. Craig Kuczynski, who's been working out of Alberta. He was in Ottawa for a while. And he's been doing really wonderful work in the space of interprofessional teams and where technology intersects with the activities that they do. And he kind of broadens it out, not just to kind of the tasks that the teams are doing together, but also some of their collaborative behavior work. that we need to consider. So when we're talking about kind of expanding the role and expanding what people can and can't do, technology starts to play an important part in that. They start to be, somebody else in the room who can actually do something for our patients. And we can think about that in two ways. We can think about that in the tasks, the actual activities of care that we are delivering. We can also think about it in the way that people think and do their work in a practice. And this is sort of getting to Audrey's point about how it's not just you learn something and you're a static being, but technology becomes part of the context that changes our value and how we think as individuals and in teams together. And what it can do is actually alleviate cognitive burden, which is leading to attrition and stress and burnout for our clinicians. And we can think through which cognitive tasks are best suited to our technologies that we have in the room and as part of our team. So it plays both this kind of task role and also this kind of cognitive role, and it also plays an important relational role. I didn't bring a slide up on this, but we've been doing some fun ethnographic work about how we have relationships to technology and we build relationships through technology. And that's a really core component of primary care because it is a relational space, right? Clinicians need to relate to each other and we need to relate to our patients meaningfully and in a trust-based environment. And technology has lots of power to support or disable that kind of relationship. So we need to sort of think about technology, or I would argue, and some others have as well, like a member of your team. Like they're sitting around the room with your interprofessional team, just like anybody else. And we need to think carefully about what is their role in that team, what value are they bringing, and what am I asking of this technology? Now, you'll notice I haven't talked about what technologies got. I haven't talked about OceanMD or TELUS or any other things that are maybe making you feel a little prickly. Because I think we also need to think about this in a technology like specific tool agnostic way, and more about the functions that these different tools in front of us can actually play to the tasks, cognitive activities, and relational requirements of primary care. So here's our work that I'll give you, and I think I'm on time so that we have some time for work. I would like you guys to work in your little teams and talk about what is going to make technology a good team member in an interprofessional primary care team. And as best as possible, try to not think about specific technologies. Don't tell me which EMR or which functions or which cool new tools you've got in your tool chest. We can get to that. Focus on function. What function is it playing where it's adding value and not adding burden and not stressing everybody out and possibly creating additional trauma that we seem to be placing on our system as we hand off new technologies without supporting people. And we'll come together, and as a group, we're going to talk about what's in the way of getting us to that beautiful team environment in which our technology friend is right with us. Okay, so I think 10 minutes. Hi, everybody. We're going to start coming back to the room. It's funny, I thought I heard like lulling, so I was like, let's bring us all back now. Are you louder than me? As we all settle back, and I might call on people soon.
Dr. Steele Gray would like your attention.
Oh, you're so much louder than me. That's so better. All right, thank you guys. You did it. All right, who is wanting to start? What are some functions and features of our beautifully digital friend?
I think one of the features is actually more about the people using them needing to understand how these tools actually work. Because when we derive an answer from something like AI, if we can't explain how that answer was derived, particularly if you're talking to a patient, they're going to lose trust in you and start to question, why do they need you in the first place? If you're just like blindly giving out answers from the box, I'm just going to use the box then. And I think you know, in data science and things like that, we already see things like this happening where, like I'm in infectious disease surveillance, where we're putting out numbers for COVID, for example, and then some changes to our algorithm happen and the numbers change. And then the public says, well, why'd your numbers change? And we go, oh, because our algorithm changed. Why'd your algorithm change? Oh, I don't really know. That was the other team. I didn't do that. That was them. Ask them. They go, well, actually, no, I'm asking you. Like, you see how this starts to happen. So I think, yeah, the user training, the decision clarity and transparency, because if we're also talking about like proprietary algorithms in EMRs, I can see that there's already quite a few companies that have proprietary algorithms. They won't let us lift up the hood. They won't let us look at what's happening in there. And when updates get applied, answers change. Again, we can't explain the difference. And I think that this will all erode therapeutic relationships, and it will further erode people's trust in healthcare providers. So I think that's the foundation to build all of this on.
Yeah, that's super interesting also in a team-based care environment, because that clarity on decision making also holds for humans. That if you don't know how the human across the room made a decision and they're not clear about that, you're going to erode the trust in that relationship too. Super great reflection. Yeah, go ahead.
So functioning of a team requires good communication between the members of the team, which in this context is interoperability.
What do you mean by interoperability?
Well, as an IT specialist, I can clearly pontificate about that. We all currently use multiple tools that often don't talk to each other and can't talk to each other. And particularly when you're working within team functions, different team members have their own tools. So it's all about being able to find what you want in one place and bring it together very simply. We had a little conversation here about the EMR being able to access the higher level extracts that are provincial potentially, that'll tell you what drug somebody's on or what tests they've had, etc. So all of those things need to be integrated into the EMR for the EMR to function in that way. And the same applies to any other tools if you're going to be agnostic about the specific tool.
Thanks, Ellen. And the thing I like about that is recognizing that there is an ecosystem of technology, right, that we need to attend to. Interoperability is a really interesting one we might want to unpack when we get into what's in the way. But so thank you for bringing that one. Ivy.
We had two pieces we discussed. One was similar to the the communication piece, but we did talk about that teams are communicating now. And they're communicating with things that we all use day to day, like email and WhatsApp and text messaging and faxing. So is there a way to actually just have that work? Like, and have that be, I don't know, allowed or available or whatever. Everyone knows how to do that. You don't need an extra login. You don't have to learn about a whole new system. And we know they do it. They email password protected spreadsheets to each other to try to manage teams. The second one we talked about was, it would be great if it could make things easier for patients. So we talked about how during the pandemic, New Brunswick and other places, I think, managed to get vaccine appointment availability done online. And so people could book the easiest location for them at the, and so that was a real lift in terms of reducing what human beings had to do in the other end.
So I love that, because it also comes up to this access idea. So both the communication and patient support piece, and we were sort of chatting on the side because we've been talking about access broadly. So there's like access for patients into the system as well, but then there's access across team members in the communication space that we also need to think about, that can streamline the process. So you're right, we have so many tools here, like so many, and none of them nicely actually work together because we're not super clear on what our processes are. And it comes back to kind of like this implementation issue. I think we had a person over here. Oh, okay.
Hello? Okay, perfect. Okay, my name is Jenny Shea. I'm a family physician and one of the primary care co-leads at the North Toronto OHT. So I gave a concrete example of what I've seen work really well at a clinic. So first you check in or you sign up online, book your appointment, and then when you go in at the check-in, it's actually a tablet, and then you select whether you want to speak with a human or you just want to check in. And then once you click check in, the computer tells you where to go, whether you're going to the waiting room or you're going to a clinic room because the doctor or the nurse is ready for you. And then you go in, and there's also a tablet outside of the room where the nurse would then check in. And then once the nurse is done, the nurse checks out and then says, ready for so-and-so doctor. The doctor will come in, and then once the doctor is done, they either check out, or if they need a nurse back in, that's what they'll do. They'll select for the nurse to come in. And once the person is done, they'll say, no, room needs to be cleaned. And then someone comes and clean the room, and then once they leave, it says, no, room is clean and ready to be used again. So a few things. So it's so efficient, like you know where you're going. You also know the expected time. Like as a patient waiting out there, you know if it's going to be in 5 minutes, you're going to see the nurse, or if it's in 10 minutes, you know who's in the room. So you don't have issues where you accidentally walk in on somebody or you go into the wrong room. You don't have that issue. You also know when the room needs to be cleaned. Like sometimes, like there's once where I walk into the room and it's clearly not clean, and I had to clean it myself, like as a patient. So it's kind of, it enhances the patient experience. It is efficient. You don't get into an issue where one doctor is running behind and there's like multiple patients, you know, stuck in different rooms, and another doctor saying like, hey, I need a room, but like you're taking up all these rooms, right? So it's like, it's just an amazing way to integrate digital technology. Thank you.
That's a super helpful reflection, and kind of getting at, you know, streamlining kind of our processes. And what I really heard out of that was a journey guide, right? And when we do some interoperability work and we ask, you know, what do you minimally need to understand? And I was chatting with Matthew Myers from London Health Sciences recently. They did some really cool work in that space. The clinicians, they said we all need, so no barriers to access, and Ivy and I were sort of having a side chat about this. We all need to know exactly what the patient's journey has been, so we even know where to go for our data. And how nice if the patient could also see their journey through information systems as well as their caregivers. I'm aware we're down to 2 minutes, and I feel like Izzy might start throwing stuff at me. Do you want to do one more comment, and then I'm going to do just a wrap up reflection. We didn't quite get to what is in the way, but I think that we have some like key things we would want to dig at first, and we can ask that question next, but please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for framing it as a good team member, because I often distance myself from the technology, and some of my favorite coworkers are Power Automate and Excel and Power Automate. So that's, it's good to frame it that way. But what if this colleague is a bit toxic? How do we acknowledge 3 areas where technology, this coworker, is maybe in breach of our HR or sector policies?
Yeah.
One being preventing a for-profit monopoly that may not have public interest in mind. 2, technology being a driver of climate change and the massive server farms that we rely on to make these tools work. And 3, technology is rooted in some pretty abusive labor strategies. And I hate to ruin a feel-good Friday, but an industrial complex that is also rooted in white supremacy. So what role do we play as colleagues and a sector to empower these solutions while recognizing these toxic trends?
Oh, I want to spend like a whole day on this. And, you know, I think one of the risks, and if we're going to be kind of like politically pushing, is thinking about how we're writing up our digital health strategies right now that are overly vendor centric, which they largely are, which is giving a lot of power and a lot of access and ownership over data, which is powerful and is worth a lot, to people that aren't necessarily in the public interest. So there's that layer. And then the kind of like toxic team member thing sort of comes from also being overly vendor centric, where vendors have largely built technologies that support scheduling and billing, not high functioning teamwork. So when we build stuff, we kind of go and ask people, what's the challenge you're facing and how do we create something together? And not every technology out there has done that work and they don't understand the system well. So there are kind of procurement and implementation ways of addressing some of those questions. And possibly from like a regulatory and action standpoint, we have lots of work and lots of technologists and implementation scientists working in the space that have nice guidelines on how we can avoid toxic technologies, and still maintain ownership over the direction that we're going to go. And I do want to land on two final thoughts. One is something we keep seeing is we think about technology as just doing old stuff faster. And some of the things I'm hearing in the room is thinking about it more like a transformative piece. It can transform us in really dangerous ways, but it can also transform us in really positive ways as well. And we fall into a trap of technology just helps us do it faster. But what it is might not be right, which is kind of what we've been talking about for the last day and a half. So, if we can think about it more as a transformative tool that is a friend, as long as we like negotiate our friendship a little bit, then, maybe we can actually get ahead of the pack a little bit. I'll end there.